Martha. Hello, everyone. It's a bit weird for us not being able to actually see any of you, but hopefully you're all able to see us and hear us. Welcome to Climate Questions with Dynamic Earth. My name is Chris.
And I'm Katrina.
And we're going to be talking all about what climate change is, some of the things that scientists are doing to slow it down, some things you can do as well, and try and answer as many questions as possible that you might have. So Martha's already said, if you want to submit questions in the chat function or in the Q&A bit of the screen, then we will try and answer them. We've got a little bit of time about halfway through the session and at the end as well. So we'll answer as many as we possibly can. Our friend Lauren is working behind the scenes to try and take as many questions as possible and pass them over to us. But if you do have any other questions that we don't fit into the session, we're happy to take any emails afterwards and try and respond to your schools as well. So we can get started. Now, I said we were going to be talking all about climate change, but if we're going to talk about it, then we should probably try and understand what it is. And to introduce that, I am going to pass over to Katrina.
Okay, so we are going to share our screen with you now. So you've probably heard the term climate change over and over again. We're going to talk about what's actually happening on our planet. So here you have planet Earth and this black line around it, which is our atmosphere. Now, our atmosphere is filled with greenhouse gases. Again, you've probably heard that term. So I want you to think of some greenhouse gases. What about carbon dioxide or methane? If you thought of water vapor or nitrous oxide, you're right too. So there's lots of greenhouse gases there. So what is happening is the sun is bringing all this heat into our planet, which is then bouncing off the Earth and getting trapped in the atmosphere. And that is trapped by those greenhouse gases. And this is known as the greenhouse effect. So just like if you have a greenhouse in your garden, all the light comes in and all of the warmth stays in there as well. Now this is a natural phenomenon. It's been happening for millennia, and so we weren't worrying about it until humans came along. And unfortunately, we have been adding lots and lots of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. And what's that doing is changing our atmosphere. And so when all of that sun's heat comes in, a lot more of it is trapped, making our planet really, really warm. So what I would like you to do now is, in your classes, come up with a few sources of greenhouse gases. So what do you think is producing carbon dioxide or methane? And then I'd like you to pop some in our chat feature. So you don't have to come up with many, just whatever pops into your head, pop it down there, and Lauren will let us have a know what you're thinking. And we are going to stop sharing our screen with you as well. Awesome. Okay, so have a little think about what we do in our daily lives that might release them. Yes, okay. So we've got some great ones coming in already. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a little demo for you just to show you what's happening. So while Lauren's taking in all your answers, I'm going to ask Chris to pick up the planet Earth.
Here we go.
Okay, so now Chris is looking a little bit exposed there. So I'm going to add an atmosphere. Here we go. Okay, so now earthing Chris there, I've got a nice little atmosphere. And now we are going to add some of your greenhouse sources. So humans, yes, we are the ones adding more greenhouse gases by doing things like driving cars. So let's add some cars to the list here. There we go. And then what we've got factories. That's a great one. All types of factories, things that make goods, clothes, energy. So all of them are releasing more greenhouse gases. How are you feeling under there, Chris?
It's getting warmer.
It's looking quite thick, isn't it? Fossil fuels, that's a great one. And now we're talking about methane. So cow farts and burps, that's a great one. So cows do produce methane. And when you have big factory farms, they are adding lots of methane to the atmosphere. Nuclear factories, trains, we've got some great ones coming in. I only have one blanket left. Basically, we don't want to put too many on, Chris, there. So transport again. So we're talking about things like planes, cars, and we'll pop those up there. Okay, well, how are you doing now?
Well, it's quite warm. The atmosphere is quite thick now.
It's looking very warm under there. So I'm going to ask you to stop submitting your greenhouse sources now. And Chris, you can throw those blankets off and cool yourself down. Now you came up with so many ideas that I actually ran out of blankets. So what we're going to do is share our screen again with you. And we'll just highlight some of those things that you sent in. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, that was great. There were so many coming in so quickly.
Awesome. Right. Could you click it, please? There we go. So we have cars, lots and lots of cars. There's motorbikes there as well. We've got factories, all sorts of factories. Cows from their burping and their farting. And houses. Yes, so you talked about humans, and your home is a real big generator of greenhouse gases. So when you're switching your lights on, when you're heating your bath water, all of those kind of things contribute. We've got aeroplanes. They're especially bad because they fly high up in the sky and release gases directly into the atmosphere. And then we've got your devices. So the laptops we're all on today, the smart boards, charging them and running them also add greenhouse gases. So now we've figured out what's causing it, Chris is going to have a little talk about what we can do about it. So I'm going to pass this over.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to introduce a new phrase, but what's probably a new phrase to a lot of you. It was new to me. It is climate innovation. So as Katrina says, we have a good idea now of what is causing climate change and what's causing it to happen more quickly. And so we're going to have to think about some of the wacky ideas that scientists and engineers around the world have come up with to try and slow the effects down. So on the screen, you should be able to see a couple of ideas there. So one of them might be an enormous umbrella in space, which can cast a bit of shade onto planet Earth to protect us from the sun's rays and stop the planet from getting too warm. Or maybe an enormous blanket on the North Pole, which can reflect lots of sunlight and heat back into space as well. Now, those are a couple of ideas, but we are going to go through some more. And some of them are going to be real ideas that scientists have come up with, and some of them are going to be made up by us, okay? And we want you to try and identify which ones are science and which ones are fiction. Now, to do this, you will need a piece of paper and something to write with, okay? And so in your classes, I can't tell if there's a mad rush to get some paper out to everyone in the class. You might have it ready already. But what we want you to do is to write science on one side of the paper and fiction on the other side of the paper. And as we go through all these different innovative climate creations, we want you to hold up the word science if you think it's true and being researched right now, or fiction if you think it is totally made up, okay? Now you can try and keep score if you like. We've got 16 all together, but about halfway through we're going to be taking some questions. So there will be a little bit of time to catch a breather and ask some questions and catch up. And you can compete against each other in the classroom if you'd like to. And so you can keep score. As I say, it's going to be out of 16 in total. And you can see who can get the highest score in your class. Okay, now hopefully you've had enough time to get some pen and paper ready. If not, try and keep track in your head, or put your hand up if you think it's science or fiction. Now, first one is mimic a volcano. So scientists coming up with a way of spraying mineral particles into the atmosphere that can reflect the sun's heat. And using a little balloon to steer it around. Do you think that sounds like science, or do you think that sounds like fiction? Now you've only got 3 seconds to make up your mind. So hold up that piece of paper if you think it's true or false. This one was science. So researchers at Harvard University in America have come up with a balloon that they can steer that releases little particles into the atmosphere that will reflect a bit of the sun's light and heat. And it's just made of calcium carbonate. And that sounds like a complicated mineral, but it's actually found in seashells and in eggshells. It's really common on planet Earth and really cheap to produce. So next up, you should all know how the game works now. We've got flatulence capture. So we already talked a little bit about cow burps and cow farts, But this one is all about people farting. So have scientists come up with underwear designed to capture your farts and stop methane from escaping up into the atmosphere and contributing as a greenhouse gas. Do you think that is science or fiction? You've only got a few seconds to make up your mind, and we'll find out that it is fiction. Sadly, nobody's come up with special pants that will absorb your farts and absorb that methane to stop it going up into the atmosphere. But we are not a provider of massive amounts of greenhouse gases in that way. We don't produce enough methane to be worried about. Okay, next up, we've got geothermal power. So using heat from the earth to generate electricity and heat people's homes. Do you think that we can use the heat from underneath the Earth's surface to generate electricity to power our homes? Have a quick think. And in 3, 2, 1, this one is science. So you might have heard of geothermal power before. It's used quite a lot in countries that have a lot of volcanoes already. So countries like Iceland, they have heat underneath the ground that's quite easily accessible. They use it to even bake bread. They've used the heat from under the Earth's surface to do stuff like that. But we can also use it to power our homes by heating up water, turning that into steam, and that turns turbines, which will generate electricity. Next up, rubbish houses. So, and these are houses made of rubbish, not just houses that you don't think look very good, using waste materials that would otherwise end up in landfill to build houses. Do you think that sounds like science, or do you think that sounds made up? Have a little think about it, and in 2 seconds, make sure you're holding up your answer. It is science. So there's a researcher down in Brighton in England who has helped to build a waste house that is made of 90% waste materials. So these are all materials that would have otherwise ended up in the bin or in the dump, or actually being put to use rather than just thrown away. Next up, it is artificial snow cover. So covering mountains with artificial snow all year round to reflect some of the sun's rays. Do you think that scientists are covering mountains in fake snow to help reflect the sun's rays? You've got 3 seconds to make up your mind. Go with your gut or change at the last minute. That is fiction. So it would be quite a lot of effort to cover enormous mountains with lots of little bits of fake snow. And we'd have to make sure that if we did try it, the material was made of something that wouldn't harm any plant life or animal life. So if it was made of little bits of plastic or anything like that, that could be damaging. So we haven't managed to do anything like that just yet. Now, we've talked quite a bit already about farting. So we've talked about humans farting and cows farting, but can farmers feed cows seaweed to reduce how much methane they produce in their burps and their farts? Do you think that sounds like science or fiction? So you've got a couple of seconds to hold up your answer. This one is science. So by adding some red seaweed into some of the cow's food, it actually blocks the methane from being created in their stomachs. So that means that they're not producing it when they burp and fart, and it's not going up into the atmosphere. And it reduces the amount of methane that cows create by up to 99%. So it's very, very effective. Now, we've got sea level adjustment. You might have heard of rising sea levels affecting our planet and being a major result of climate change. So what if we just scooped some of this stuff out of the oceans? By removing boats, animals, and shipwrecks from the bottom of the ocean, then we could get the sea levels to go down. Do you think that sounds like science or fiction? Have a little think and hold up your answer when you are ready. This one is fiction. Now, you can understand the reason behind that. If you've got some dishes in the sink, for example, you take all the plates out, the level of water goes down, but you'd have to remove so much stuff from the ocean for this to work. We couldn't really just scoop out all the fish and the whales and other sea life and just plonk them on the land. So maybe not a solution that we can run with. Okay, so this is the last one that I am gonna go through, and then we're gonna try and take some of your questions, okay? So this one is wrapping glaciers in blankets. We already talked about fake snow, but what do you think about covering mountains in blankets that could reflect the sun's rays out into space and stop the ice from melting? Do you think that sounds like science, or do you think it sounds like fiction? You've got a few seconds. 3, 2, 1. This one is actually science. It sounds almost as ridiculous as the fake snow idea, but scientists have been researching how to cover glaciers in blankets that can reflect the sun's rays and stop the ice from melting. And you can see a couple of pictures of some of that initial research here. It's being done in the Alps in Switzerland, and it might not be something that spreads across the entire mountain range, but it seems to be quite effective. There's just some issues with how plant life and animal life can survive when there's lots of blankets all over their habitat. All right, so we've gone through the first 8 questions of science or fiction. Now we're going to see if you have any questions for us. We know that we have ripped through that quite quickly. So if you need a moment to chat in your classes and write up some questions, that's absolutely fine.
We have had some very weird and wacky ideas there, haven't we?
Yeah, so our friend Lauren, some of our other friends at work have tried to prepare us for some of the mad questions you might come up with. And it's quite a complicated topic, so there's lots of questions that can be thrown at us, and we'll do our best to try and answer them as best we can.
Ooh. Chris, what made you interested in climate change?
So I think the most interesting thing about it for me is just how it affects everything. So it affects the environment, but it's going to affect the jobs that we have. It's going to affect what the world looks like in future. It's going to affect everyone around the world. And I can't think of anything else that's going to affect so many things across the planet. So it's also something that is going to affect things for a long time to come. So that's why I'm quite interested in climate change. What about you, Katrina?
Well, I first got interested because I love the ocean. I love everything about the ocean, and unfortunately that is one of the things that's suffering a lot at the moment. And then, yeah, like Chris, once I realised what was happening to the ocean, I opened a whole door to a whole new world of all the issues that we're facing here on planet Earth. And we've still got our whole lives ahead of us, so we want to make sure that we've got a nice planet to live on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a great question to start off with. Now, next up. Ooh, how cold are glaciers, Katrina?
Very, very cold. So glaciers do naturally melt during the summer months as well, but they are melting at a faster rate. So they are extremely cold, but they do get a little bit warm and melt in the summer. But yeah, you'll have to wrap up if you want to visit a glacier. I recommend multiple layers, thermals, coats, hats, everything.
Yeah, all your best winter gear.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we might have a couple more questions coming in.
I know Lauren frantically trying to keep track of all of them.
How bad or harmful is carbon monoxide?
Ooh, that's a good one. Now, we talk about carbon dioxide a lot because that's the main gas that goes into the atmosphere when we burn fossil fuels. But carbon monoxide, I'm not as sure how harmful it is as a greenhouse gas. It's very harmful to humans. So in your homes, if you had a carbon monoxide leak, then you need to get out. That's very, very dangerous. As a greenhouse gas, I would have to double check. It's nowhere near as prevalent. There's not as much of it in the atmosphere. It's about 80% of the emissions are, oh, great answer. It's about 80% is carbon dioxide. Just had someone else answer for me. Too heavy to go into the atmosphere. So that makes sense. I'm not a chemist, as you might have guessed. Okay, Katrina, let's see if you can answer this one. What is the hottest temperature ever recorded?
Well, that would be in Death Valley, USA, and it is 50 degrees. Now, to put that in perspective, our summers here have been getting to around 28, 30 degrees, and everyone is out at the sea, in their swimming costumes, cooling off in the water. So you can imagine that 20 degrees more is quite a difference. Even when it's kind of 16, 17 degrees here, we like to get our t-shirts out. So you can imagine that is blisteringly hot.
Hey, let's see what other questions that we've got. We can take a couple more.
Yeah, we're loving this. Oh, it's actually 56 degrees to be precise. So 6 more degrees makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
Could any fiction ideas eventually work?
So, possibly. I think the thing is that we can see bigger effects by reducing the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that we produce in the first place. So the priority should really be trying to reduce how much we're creating rather than trying to catch up with as many ideas as possible to stop climate change from happening. But all of these novel ideas, I think, could potentially happen in future. So, for example, a wind turbine might have sounded like quite a bizarre idea when it was first proposed. So just this massive fan standing out in a field that just spins and spins and spins and creates electricity. And it's taken decades for them to sort of pick up speed and be installed in more places across the country and around the world. So that will have sounded really odd when it started. So the things that we think sound weird, all those fiction ideas, they might become something one day. Maybe they wouldn't look exactly like we've presented them, and some are more likely than others. So scooping things out of the bottom of the ocean, I don't think that's going to be a solution across the world. But you never know.
Yeah, and it's important to try. That's what we're here for. We can only do our best, and so if you come up with a wacky idea and it doesn't work, at least you've tried.
Yeah.
So
great.
Okay. So we're going to start back doing a bit more fact and fiction. Don't worry, Lauren has the chat function there. Thank you so much for your questions. We are loving all this interaction. But we're going to give you another round. We're going to have a little look at some other wacky ideas to save the planet.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to start with brightening clouds. So I'll give you a minute just to get your papers and everything back together. But do you think that adding salt mist from the ocean and sending it into the clouds to make them thicker, whiter, and brighter to reflect sunlight is a feasible option? What do you reckon? You've got 3. It's science! Sorry, I'm a little technical glitch there, but this one's crazy actually. The photo here is a prototype, so this is what it could look like. But they reckon it'll take over 1,000 boats, so it would be a lot of work. Okay, so moving on to artificial trees. So we've talked a lot about sources of greenhouse gases, but trees are a sink. And what that means is they take up carbon dioxide. So do you reckon scientists have thought, well, let's build some artificial trees to bring up carbon dioxide? Okay, you've got 3 seconds to decide if you think it's science or fiction. It is science. Yes, and now I cheated a little bit because the picture that you saw there are these Singapore super trees, and they are used for solar energy and water storage, but they don't capture carbon. The actual trees that they're designing look a little bit more like goalposts, so nothing like trees. But they're thought to be about 1,000 times more efficient than trees, so it's definitely an idea that's worth investing in. Ocean cooling. And I've told you I love the ocean, and I hope you all have a good passion for it too, because it is super cool. But it needs cooling. So do you think that putting giant ice blocks into the ocean to help cool it down is an idea that people are toying with? You have 3 seconds to decide and put them up. It is fiction. The iceberg you saw there was very, very square indeed, and did look a bit like a block of ice. It's very rare for icebergs to be that square. But we can't go around dumping a load of fresh water into our salty seas, as that would mess up our ecosystems. Okay, lab-grown meat. I want you to have a look at that picture of the chicken there. Do you reckon this was grown in a lab using animal cells? Scientists have thought that if they use animal cells to culture meat, there won't be any methane emissions. So you've got 3 seconds to decide whether you think we can grow meat in labs. It is science! Yes, this is crazy. So you can grow meat inside a science laboratory, and it tastes like meat because it is meat. And there are 99% less methane emissions, which is crazy. But the only issue is that piece of chicken would set you back a lot of money. So it is very, very expensive at the moment. Okay, orbital fans. We've talked a lot about space. At the beginning there, Chris mentioned the picture had a giant umbrella. Not sure if that's practical, but what about a fan? So do you think sending giant fans into space where the Earth, it can cool the Earth, what do you reckon? I'll give you 3 seconds to decide. You think orbital fans are real? They are fiction. So this is a picture from a video game, and it would be awesome if we could do that, but fans wouldn't really work where the air is so thin, and you'd have to send a lot up there as well. Okay, hamster power. So if anyone has a hamster or has a friend with a hamster, I'm sure you've put them in a ball. We used to put my little Hackety in a ball, and he used to run around. Now, do you think scientists have thought about using the energy they're creating to power schools? So you'd have a little room with loads of hamsters in, which I think would be quite fun to sit in. You've got 3 seconds to decide if your school could be run off hamster power. What do you reckon? It is fiction. Now, you would need so many hamsters to power a school, but also you don't really want to make those hamsters constantly run on the wheel now. That wouldn't be very nice, would it? So we're going to keep to just petting them and giving them treats. Okay, algae-covered buildings. Now, you might have heard of algae. It's a plant, so it photosynthesizes. So it takes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and it uses it to produce energy. So do you think scientists are going to fill massive tubes of algae and attach them to buildings to help power the building? What do you reckon? Yeah, that's quite a good idea, bad idea? It is science. So this is actually happening. Algae is known as a biofuel, and that's because it produces so much energy just using the sun. So here are some more pictures, just to get a little idea, because this one blew my mind. There are 15 different houses in this building block here, and they are all powered by algae. So their lights, their heating, their TVs are all powered by algae. Okay, now this is the last one, carbon engineering. So we've talked again about sinks. So what do you reckon about giant fans sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and then storing it underground? You've got 3 seconds to decide. Is it science or fiction? It is science. Yep, so it doesn't quite look like the picture here. They're a little bit more hidden away. And what they do is they take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and then they store it in old oil wells underground in the form of gas. Now this is thought to be about as efficient as 40 million trees in just 1 year. Now, it'd be quite tough planting 440 million trees, but just one fan takes up a lot less space and can do just as much work. So yeah, there's loads of crazy ideas that we've got there, and I feel like you've got loads of questions coming in as well. So do you want to stop and answer a few more questions?
Yeah, we can answer some more questions just now.
Lauren is currently running out of whiteboards, so we're loving having questions, but we'll pause this for now. I hope you all did well.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah, there's some very strange ideas out there that blew our minds. We were very confused about some of them, but let's answer some of your questions. Awesome. How do scientists come up with these ideas?
That is a good question. So I think that can be so different for so many scientists. Some of them will build on some work that's already been done. So when you're studying a subject, it's really great to get the help of other scientists who are working in the field, and you can chat amongst yourselves and come up with ideas as a group, and then you can all work together on coming up with new stuff. Sometimes you're just really passionate about one thing. So maybe if you're really passionate about the inner workings of a wind turbine, that might spark all of these other ideas about generating electricity through wind. Or I don't know, do you have any
Yeah,
ideas?
well, like you were saying, collaboration is really important in science. So if you want to be an astrobiologist and want to study space, it's really important that you still make friends with people that love the ocean. Because collaboration in science is really important. So scientists work together from different fields, and then they're like, oh, that's a good idea, maybe I can apply that in my field. So it's really just about your minds. So I'm sure, maybe one day you could come up with some crazy ideas.
I think what we both found is that when you've got a crazy idea, it's really great to find other people who are interested and passionate about it, and that helps you pursue it. Okay. Let's see. Ooh, Katrina, what was the coldest temperature recorded on Earth?
So the coldest temperature on Earth was in Antarctica, and it was minus 94.7 degrees. So that is extremely cold. You would not want to go out. So Antarctica doesn't have a permanent population of people because it's just too cold to survive there for us humans. And there's a few animals, but they are very well adapted to those freezing temperatures.
Yeah, we don't have as much blubber as a penguin does.
The difference between climate change and global warming. Well, sorry, you can answer.
No. That's a great question.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that here as well. So it's really two different terms for the same thing in one way. So a lot of people called it global warming in quite a long time ago. And that's not wrong. On average, the Earth is getting warmer. And we're predicting 1, 2, 3 degrees warmer. But that is an average. So some places are going to get way, way hotter, and some places are still going to get way, way colder. So even though overall the planet's getting a bit warmer, climate change just explains that different parts of the world are going to get different weather. And it's going to be a lot more extreme. It's going to change a lot more. So weather is the word we use for our local area, and climate is a much broader area across the world. So the weather can get more extreme, but the climate overall is still getting a little warmer.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation.
Yeah. Why blame recent changes on us, Katrina?
We're not playing the blame game.
Absolutely not.
No, and we are also part of the solution. So it's really important not to just be like, oh, we've done this, we can't do anything about it. But we have been monitoring our planet for a very long time and monitoring temperature changes and, like Chris said, different kinds of weather as well, so storms, forest fires. And as the population has been increasing, we have been getting more technology, more advanced, there has been a trend to follow that with our greenhouse gases. So there is a lot of evidence to suggest that us driving cars, before they were invented, there was a lot less. And so really it's all just about the evidence base. But instead of focusing on what we're doing wrong, I think now is the perfect time, especially for young people, to focus on what we can do right and how we can change things. Which actually brings us nicely on to what Chris is going to talk about next. And we can focus on how to make our planet better with what we can do.
Yeah, so we're going to chat about a couple more things, and then we're going to have some more questions at the end. So we know we've still got some more unanswered questions, and if any more do come through, we'll try our best to answer them. But we're going to chat a little bit about some of the things that you can do to play your part. Now, as Katrina says, we're not trying to blame it on people. It's just that overall, over the past couple hundred years, humans have been generating a lot more greenhouse gases than they ever did before. And we're seeing the results of that. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you can do, because it might be quite difficult for us to, for example, build that giant space umbrella. I don't know if we've got the resources to try that, or we're not in areas where we could cover glaciers with blankets. So what are those easy things that we can do every day that are going to help us play our part to slow the effects of climate change? Now, when talking about this, it's useful to think about your carbon footprint. So you might have heard that phrase before, but I know that I didn't actually really know what it meant until a few years after hearing the phrase for the first time. All it means is all of the different activities that you do every day, all of them will produce a few greenhouse gases, but some produce more than others. So when we talk about a carbon footprint, if you've got a big carbon footprint, you're doing lots of things that create a lot of greenhouse gases, and if you've got a small one, then you're doing lots of activities that don't produce much. So it's just thinking of how you can behave in an environmentally friendly way. So what we'd like you to do in your classes is have a quick chat about some of the things that you can do or that your school can do or that your family can do that can reduce that carbon footprint and help you behave in an environmentally friendly kind of a way. What things can you do every single day? And when you come up with them, you can pop them in the chat and Lauren will relay to us what you've come up with.
Yeah, and I can see lots more questions coming in. So once we've talked about what you can do, we can have another little a break for some more questions as well before we move on to our next topic. We are loving all the questions.
Yeah, we were really worried, like, but what if they don't ask us anything? What if they just want to watch? But you are asking so much, it's great.
And it's really important to talk about it and ask questions because there are no silly questions. I know that we have questions about all the sorts of things that we come across and we read, so it's really important to ask these questions and we're happy to help answer them.
Yeah.
And Lauren as well, she's doing a lot of work helping us.
Can't see her, but she's working away.
Yeah.
So, yeah. As you pop things into the chat, we'll get a few ideas and then we'll go through some of the things that we've come up with as well. Ooh, okay, so they're coming through thick and fast. Great. So I don't want to like talk too much in case you're trying to listen to me and then have a conversation in your class. So
he's looking really good.
Let's see. Lauren's got a little whiteboard she's writing the ideas on, so we'll let her fill up that whiteboard and then I'll go through some of the stuff you've come up with. Because this is all amazing stuff. Yeah. And I'm sure you've been talking about it in your schools and your classes as well. It was great to see that it's all sunk in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got loads of answers already, so I'll go through some of the stuff that you've come up with that we've come up with as well. So first up, we've got transport. So a few of you said if you walk or cycle everywhere, or if you try and get the bus, or if you try and drive an electric car, and those are all great ideas. And so you can see in our picture here that on the left, cars and planes are the ones that are creating a bit more pollution. Planes, as Katrina already mentioned, they're quite bad for it because they're already so high up that any carbon dioxide they produce goes pretty much straight into the atmosphere. And when it comes to cars, one of the big issues is that quite often you've only got 1 or 2 people in a car. But in a bus or a train, then you can have lots of people going from one place to another. So while it's still producing some greenhouse gases, it's less greenhouse gases per person because you're all in one vehicle together. So it's a more efficient way to travel. And yet if you're walking or cycling, you're not producing any greenhouse gases because you're just using your own power to do it. So that's a great start. We've also got recycling. So recycling, reusing stuff, and those are 2 huge ones. And you'll probably have heard the phrase reduce, reuse, recycle a lot already. So if you reduce the amount of new stuff that you buy, that's a great thing to do too. So we've got a couple of shops in our picture here. We love shopping in charity shops. We love buying stuff secondhand off websites like eBay. If there's stuff that you like that's pre-owned, then it's great to use that instead of buying something brand new. And that's just because factories, which we mentioned at the start when we did our blanket game, produce quite a lot of greenhouse gases when they make new materials. So reusing as much stuff as you can until you can't use it anymore is great. You're also allowed to buy new stuff, but reusing when you can is a great thing to do. And this one is all about recycling and energy in your house. So trying to use less heating. We're not saying you have to sit in the freezing cold. Obviously, we all need to help heat our homes. But using less heating, so if there's nobody in the house, just making sure that the heating's not left on, and the same with switching the lights off. Those are great ideas. Recycling when you can. So I'm sure you've got lots of recycling bins at school and at home, and so separating that out so materials can be reused as much as possible, and less stuff is just going to the bin and just sitting there. And yeah, using less paper, that's a great idea. Recycling whatever paper you do use. So yeah, those are all amazing ideas. You can see on the picture that we've got some solar panels and wind turbines on the roof. That might be a bit much for every house to manage to do, but maybe one day we'll have more solar power going straight to our homes and maybe some wind energy and providing more homes across the country as well. So all amazing work there. Next up, we've got a little bit about diet. So I've seen some suggestions about the food that you eat. So eating a vegetarian or a vegan diet. And so if you eat a lot more fruit and veg and other plant-based stuff, usually that produces fewer greenhouse gases when you're growing the crops, for example. So it tends to produce less greenhouse gases to grow fruit and veg than it does to raise animals for meat. But we're not saying you have to cut out meat and dairy completely either. The bigger problems are usually the massive industrial farms. But if you're eating dairy and meat and stuff in Scotland, that's so much better for the environment than anything that's been flown from around the world. So it goes for fruit and veg as well. If you really love strawberries and cherries, we've got amazing berry farms across Scotland. And if you're getting berries from Scotland rather than strawberries flown over from Spain, then that's going to have a lower carbon footprint. So the food that you eat can affect your carbon footprint too. And then lastly, on our little list of stuff, we've got chatting about it. So Katrina already talked about how if you're passionate about the environment and about stuff like the ocean, if you talk about it and spread the word, that's an amazing thing to do and get other people interested and focused on it as well. So if you want to do any little petitions or posters or anything, little changes that you think people should make or that would be useful, that's a great place to start. Pop it up in your window at home or maybe in the school or across walls in your classroom. That's a great thing to do. Just thinking about different things that you can do to help stop climate change from getting too bad. All right, so that's lots of amazing ideas. Sorry if there's any that I missed out, but Lauren was writing all of them down, and there were so many. I tried to cover as many as I could. Okay, so we've got a couple more questions. Do we want to try and answer a couple?
Yeah.
Okay, so got a couple more questions. We'll try and answer, then we'll have our last little bit. Try and squeeze a couple more questions in there, and that will be us nearly done. Ooh, Katrina, do oceans absorb carbon?
Yes. So I will be talking about this a little bit later on as well. I've been mentioning trees throughout and how they are a carbon sink. But yes, oceans are also a carbon sink. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of the problems are coming from. So the ocean absorbs around 50% of carbon dioxide, and it has been doing that forever. And it hasn't been an issue. But unfortunately, with more greenhouse gases going in, that means more are going into the ocean. And what happens in the ocean is the carbon dioxide actually breaks down into an acid, and it's making the ocean more acidic. Now, it's not to the point that if you touch it, you burn yourself. So us humans aren't noticing it, but creatures with coral skeletons or calcium skeletons, they are being impacted by it. So that is a great question there. Yeah. What countries produce the most carbon dioxide?
Oh, okay. So the countries that produce the most carbon dioxide tend to be the biggest ones that have lots of industry. So industry is one of the biggest creators of greenhouse gases. So the biggest one is China, and they've had a lot of advances made in industry and factories being built. Second up is the USA, and then third is India. So the three biggest producers of these greenhouse gases are all three huge countries with millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people that also have loads of space, loads of people to work in factories.
Yeah, and to add to that point, before we take a look at China's also one of the leading countries in renewable energy.
Yeah.
So instead of looking at where carbon dioxide is coming from, like we've been talking about the blame game, you can look at the positives. So China does have a massive renewable energy kind of initiative out there as well. So it's really important to push those initiatives and kind of Yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the countries that produce the most greenhouse gases are also the countries with the power and the sway to make a change. So China and the USA are two of the big ones that at meetings like COP26, which you might have heard of, they're two of the big countries that are having these discussions about how to make massive changes.
Yeah, so we should push them to use renewable energy.
Yeah. Where is most affected by climate change?
That's a really good question. So obviously here in Scotland, you might not be noticing the effects of climate change. We've had a bit of snow recently, we've had quite hot summers, but it doesn't really seem like a big deal. But there are some countries that are really at risk. Some of the most being Japan, the Philippines, and Germany. It's an interesting one. But lots of these countries are very low or islands, and that means they're actually really impacted by sea level rise. Now, something that didn't exist a decade ago was climate refugees, but that's actually been added to the dictionary now because people are having to leave their own countries because of climate change, whether that's sea level rise or kind of in African countries, they're suffering from drought as well. So yeah, that's really important. Although we may not feel it here, other people and other countries are being really badly affected. Is it true that Greenland lost 279 billion tons of ice?
Yes, it is. It has lost billions of tons of ice. It's been over about 18 years, but yes, it has happened. So you see a lot of pictures of a lot of ice sheets melting and breaking off in the Arctic and Antarctic, and yeah, it's true. Like it's a shame, but it is happening. Do we want to move on to the last little bit, and then we'll do a couple more questions at the end?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
So we're going to share our screen with you again.
Yeah. So amazing. We've got so many questions. We'll try and answer them if we can, but we also know that we don't want to keep you all day.
Yeah. So you have been amazing today. You've been so interactive with us. And now what we're going to do is put all those ideas that we thought of together, and we're going to figure out how to save our planet. Could you tap the laptop, please?
A little bit of suspense. There we go.
Awesome. So you talked about doing all these amazing things. You might have heard about protecting places. So you've got marine protected areas, and you've also got things like national parks. And these are really important because we want to keep our ecosystems as they are. But unfortunately, around 75% of land area is already degraded. And the ocean is just too vast to even figure out what's going on, but we know that it's severely damaged. So it's really important that we take these ecosystems and we restore them, because then they can function as they once did, and they can help bring back carbon dioxide and also a safe haven for wildlife. So you can all see this picture on your screen here. I would like you to come up with a couple of ideas about what you think we can do to this specific picture here to make it better. So the restoration decade gives us 10 years to try and figure out how to make it better. So one simple thing I can see that we could do here is plant trees. There are hardly any trees there, so we want way more trees. You can see that the glacier at the top is melting. What can we do about that? That ocean definitely doesn't look like it's got much life in it. And you can see that there's lots of factories. The city there looks like it's got a lot of smog over it, and there is lots of very dry soil. So I'd like you just to have a little think about what you can do, and then we're going to see if with all your ideas we can try and make this a better planet. So Lauren, I can see her writing down all your ideas, so I think we've got a good chance at getting that glacier back. But yeah, unfortunately this is the reality of our planet at the moment. And again, in Scotland, we're quite lucky here. We have lots of initiatives for planting trees. We have lots of green energy. We have the most amazing landscapes here, and a lot of them are protected already. But if you go to other countries, there is a lot less protection. And so we need to make sure that we're rebuilding these ecosystems.
Yeah, because the decade of ecosystem restoration is over the next 10 years. So, for example, if any of you watching are 10 years old now, then this is going to be like when you're 20. You're going to be a proper grown-up with responsibilities and stuff. So this is all going to affect you, and hopefully you'll see these changes over the next 10 years or so.
Okay, so should we see what you've come up with? Yeah, planting trees, no rubbish, that's really important. So don't just go and throw your rubbish on the ground, because most of the time it ends up in the ocean. So that brings us back to reducing and recycling as well. And you can see in the picture, look how horrible those rivers look. And they're going straight into the ocean. So we need to make sure we're not putting more rubbish in there. Less factories. Yes, this is a great idea, but we do still need factories, don't we? Because we still need to buy stuff. So can anyone, oh, there you go, perfectly. Renewable energy. So if we use renewable energy to fuel these factories, that might help. Solar and wind, yeah, perfect. And catching all the plastic. They have actually designed a robot that goes around the ocean and collects plastic, but the ocean is very big, so it's not doing a whole lot right now. Sea boundaries. Yeah, so this is a really interesting one. As you can see in the picture there, the waves look like they're crashing in, and lots of countries are suffering from floods and lots of tsunamis and things like this crazy weathers. And what happens is things like coral reefs and mangroves are really important for coastal protection. So although you might not be able to see them deep down in the ocean, they are actually protecting lots of islands and seas from erosion and flooding. Okay, well, it looks like you have some great ideas. So what we're going to do is we're going to see if all of these ideas can make our planet better. What do you reckon? Do you reckon?
Yeah!
We did it! Awesome! So all of those ideas that we've talked about today that you've given us, we are able to make the planet look like this once again. So don't feel despair. We've got to look at this with a positive spin, that our personal changes in life and also joining together as a community and an overall globe can help places and bring them back to life. And I would love to live there. It looks very nice, especially if there's whales jumping out of my window. Okay, so we are now going to take a few more questions because we have them flooding in now. And what I'm going to do is stop sharing the screen.
We'll take a few more questions. We won't get through all of them, I don't think, because we've only got a few minutes left in our session. But if you do have any other questions that you want to ask us that we don't cover, then you can either contact us if you've got any of our contact details, or if you contact TechFest and they can pass them on to us as well. Okay, what are your carbon footprints? Our carbon.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't done much in the last year, so I'm assuming it's quite low at the moment. You can find out for yourself. We should probably do that later, but you can get carbon footprint calculators. If you just go online, they'll have one there, and you can actually figure it out. And it asks questions like where you live, what do you drive a car, what do you eat, and that will help you figure it out. I
think everyone's carbon footprint's probably gone down a little bit over the past year because we've been traveling a lot less. But yeah, no, that's a good question. We don't have a number we can give you, sadly.
Hopefully it's low.
Yeah. Okay, next up.
Is it true that the Earth has been warming since 1998?
So, yes, but it's actually been warming for longer than that. So when we talk about humans producing greenhouse gases and that sort of speeding up climate change, really that goes back to the Industrial Revolution, which you might have heard of. It's basically when humans started manufacturing stuff in the 1800s and started building all these factories and burning fossil fuels. And that's what started creating a lot more greenhouse gases than we'd ever created before. So warming has been happening on average kind of since then, so longer ago than the 90s. But the late 90s is probably when we started hearing a bit more about global warming, and then later was when we started referring to it more often as climate change instead. Ooh, and what generation will deal with this?
That's a great question. We have kept on talking about how you have your whole lives ahead of you. So you are really impacted by this, but it is not your burden to carry alone. Every generation has to play their part in doing this, and every generation will be affected in some way. Even we will, and our parents and our grandparents. And the fact is it's happening right now. So this isn't something that's going to be happening in the future. It's happening to countries right now, so we're all being affected, and it is the responsibility of all of us to help do it, not just you guys. So don't feel like you have to take this on alone. We're all here to help.
Yeah. And we'll take one more question just now. Oh, so what do volcanoes have to do with climate change? That's a good question. I did talk about volcanoes right at the beginning and assumed people would know what I was talking about, but how could they possibly be related? So one of the things is that when volcanoes erupt, they spew out loads of lava, but they also spew out loads of ash and smoke. And it's the ash, the little burnt particles that can go up into the atmosphere. And depending on how big the eruption is, that changes how much is spewed into the atmosphere. And that can block some of the sun's rays. So that can create a bit more of a greenhouse effect. And we haven't noticed that so much these days. We haven't had volcanoes that erupt and destroy life all around them. And volcanoes that we can remember in our lifetimes being a bit smaller. But it's because they spew these particles that go into the atmosphere. And that's sort of the main link. But extreme weather more generally is linked with climate change because we see different weather patterns happen more often with changing climate. And we can answer all the questions you've got in an email with any other questions. So if you submit questions to TechFest, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. You've all got our email addresses, so feel free to just email us and we'll pass them along.
Here today, and then if you send them on, they can send them to us, and we'll answer as many as we can and to send them out to everyone.
Thank you so much. We absolutely love how interactive this has been.
Yes.
And we're so glad that you had so many questions to ask as well. So we hope you have enjoyed yourselves with us today.
Yeah, it was really fun, even though we can't see any of you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. On behalf of everybody on this call, I'd just like to take the opportunity to say a huge thank you to all of the team at Our Dynamic Earth. That was so interesting and so much fun and absolutely brilliant. So thank you for that. Thank you for you guys for coming. Like the guys were saying, all of your questions were brilliant. I know your lunchtime's coming up, so we're not going to keep you too long, but any questions, like we say, you can email them in or hit us up on Twitter. You can tag us at TechFest Aberdeen or Our Dynamic Earth as well, and we'll try and get back to you. But for now, thank you so much for coming. If you've enjoyed today's event, don't forget we've got a whole week still with lots of great other events, so check out our programme. There's still time to book into anything else that you fancy, and of course all of our content, including today's, will be going up on our YouTube channel, which is TechFest Aberdeen, so you can go and check that out as well. So once again, thank you very much to Chris and Katrina and Lauren, who I know was very busy in the background there trying to write down all of those questions. If I could ask you guys to hold on for just a second, and in the meantime we'll say goodbye to all of our wonderful schools that have joined us today. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks.